Whistleblower claims this all started because Adam Schiff assumed he was going to be the director of the CIA in a Hillary Clinton administration.
Adam Schiff once believed he was destined for one of the most powerful positions in Washington, the director of the CIA. That was the role he thought he would be handed if Hillary Clinton had made it to the White House. But when Donald Trump won instead, everything shifted. The whistleblower testimony that has now come to light paints the picture of a man whose political dreams were crushed. From that moment, his focus seemed to turn from ambition to revenge. According to these claims, Schiff began looking for ways to undermine the Trump administration at every turn. This wasn't just about politics. It was about someone who believed power had been stolen from him. Imagine preparing for years to step into one of the highest offices in the land, only to see it vanish overnight. The whistleblower says that frustration fueled Schiff's every move. It wasn't just committee hearings or routine oversight. There was something far more personal at play. By the way, before we continue, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us grow and share more intriguing stories. Now, let's continue. When the Russia collusion narrative began dominating headlines, Schiff took center stage. Of course.
This program was never buying it, and we did not buy into Schiff's claims. Here's a conversation on Sunday Morning Futures back from 2019. Watch this.
The Democrats have made the mistake of staking the credibility of all this on Adam Schiff. The person that they put in charge of this investigation turns out is the one that helped start it by meeting with a person who walked out of Adam Schiff's office and became the whistleblower. And at the very same time that that's happening, as you mentioned, now there's an Inspector General report that comes out that says during the last impeachment hoax, the Trump-Russia one, Adam Schiff repeatedly made false statements to the American people about the FBI.
To Schiff, it wasn't only about investigating alleged ties between Trump and Moscow, it was about proving a point, keeping the pressure on, and, according to those who worked closely with him, using his platform to try and undo the election. Result that had shattered his career plans. That's where the story begins to unravel. And from there, things only grew darker. Scandal after scandal started to swirl around Schiff, and soon the spotlight shifted to something even more damaging. Allegations that he leaked classified Russiagate intelligence. This wasn't just idle gossip whispered in the halls of Congress. These were serious claims suggesting he shared sensitive information with the media in order to keep the collusion story alive. According to reports, the Department of Justice wasn't looking the other way anymore. Officials were said to be digging deep, reviewing evidence, and even considering accountability measures against some of the most powerful figures in Washington. The timing couldn't have been worse for Schiff. He was already being hammered by critics who accused him of misleading the public during the Trump investigations. And now, leaks of classified material were being pinned directly to his name. In Washington, leaking isn't just bad form, it can be a crime that threatens national security.
Now, Adam Schiff was certainly out and about a lot throughout the last 3 years saying that there is collusion in plain sight. And now we get the IG report and we actually see the misconduct and what they call errors, fraud, whatever you want to call it. What is your reaction to what you learned from Michael Horowitz?
It wasn't just that Adam Schiff was out and about. He put out a report that said there was no FISA abuse by the FBI. That was false. He said that the FBI didn't fail to turn over exculpatory information. That was false. He said that the Steele dossier was not a central part of the FISA applications against Carter Page. That was false.
Schiff's opponents quickly seized on this, arguing that he had crossed the line from politician to manipulator, using information that was supposed to be protected by law as a political weapon. For years, many Americans had trusted Schiff as the face of the Russia investigations. But suddenly, the image of a serious, no-nonsense lawmaker began to crumble. The story was no longer about protecting democracy. It was about whether one man, fueled by anger and ambition, had put his own goals above the nation's security. That's when people began revisiting what Schiff had been saying on television, and the cracks became impossible to ignore. Back in 2019, a clip from a Sunday morning news show raised eyebrows. Today, viewed in light of the new allegations, it appears even more explosive.
Whistleblower claims this all started because Adam Schiff assumed he was going to be the director of the CIA in a Hillary Clinton administration. Of course, President Trump won and those dreams were dashed. But how could Adam Schiff deny this when we have it on tape? He being at the time either the chairman of the intelligence community or later the ranking member of the intelligence committee in the House.
In that interview, critics warned that Democrats had made a huge mistake by putting their credibility in Adam Schiff's hands. He wasn't just overseeing the investigation, they argued. He was directly tied to the very whistleblower who helped ignite the impeachment drama. According to these reports, the whistleblower had walked out of Schiff's office before filing the complaint that shook Washington. At the same time, another storm was brewing. The Inspector General's report on the FBI's actions during the first Russia investigation had just been released, and it didn't look good for Schiff. For years, he had been the loudest voice insisting that Trump's team colluded with Moscow. He repeated it on television, framed it in official hearings, and spoke as if the evidence was undeniable. But the IG report told a very different story. It described misconduct, errors, and what many critics called outright fraud in the handling of the investigation. For Schiff, this was a brutal contradiction. On one side, his public statements claiming collusion was in plain sight, and on the other, an official report exposing serious flaws in the case he had championed.
On Chuck Todd and all these other Sunday shows saying that collusion between Trump and Russia is in plain sight. How do you deny that after you said that with the role as chairman of Intelligence Committee?
Well, first of all, I think that I'm so happy this is finally coming out and we actually have proof. And the number one thing that I think is different this time is the fact that the 302 report is now unclassified. And so Congress does have the information and the proof.
On the other side stood an official government report revealing flaws and abuses that undermined everything Schiff had claimed. Suddenly, the carefully built narrative began to collapse, and his credibility, once the strongest weapon in his arsenal, was under attack from every angle. It wasn't just about what Schiff said on television. He went further. He actually released a written report that flat out denied FBI wrongdoing. In that document, he claimed there was no abuse of the FISA court, no failure to hand over critical evidence, and that the Steele dossier wasn't central to the FBI's surveillance of Carter Page. But here's the problem. Every one of those statements turned out to be false. The Inspector General's findings shredded Schiff's claims, showing that the FBI had, in fact, withheld exculpatory information and leaned heavily on the discredited Steele dossier. This wasn't a small mistake, it was a pattern of misleading the public. Schiff wasn't just spinning a narrative. He was putting his name on official documents that denied the very abuses investigators later confirmed. To critics, it looked less like transparency and more like a cover-up designed to protect his side of the political fight. And just when it seemed the scandals couldn't pile up any higher, another bombshell landed. Reports surfaced that Schiff was being investigated by a grand jury for mortgage fraud. For a sitting lawmaker, even whispers of financial misconduct were devastating. But while the mortgage fraud story captured headlines, another revelation soon stole the spotlight. And this one came directly from inside his own former staff. The revelation came from none other than Kash Patel, who declassified FBI documents containing testimony from a longtime Democratic staffer on the House Intelligence Committee. This wasn't just any staffer. He had over 2 decades of experience in the intelligence community and had spent 12 years working side by side with Schiff's team. His testimony painted a damning picture. According to him, Schiff had convinced himself that Russia had hijacked the election and that the United States was facing nothing less than a constitutional crisis. And instead of working through the proper legal channels, Schiff allegedly decided that leaking classified information was the way to topple the administration and restore what he believed was order. But the whistleblower's account didn't stop there. He claimed that when he refused to take part in this scheme, he was fired.
Much impact. This ripped our country apart. What about the fact that it put a sitting president on defense? Every time he went anywhere, he had to say, I did not collude. What about the fact that it put his administration in jeopardy because so many people weren't sure if he did something wrong and they didn't want to join the administration? What about the rest of the world who looked at this and said, wow, did Donald Trump cheat and gain the election through collusion with Russia? I mean, there were so many elements that this made-up story from the Hillary Clinton campaign generated.
Think about that. A career intelligence officer with decades of service shown the door simply because he refused to play along. To critics, this looked like undeniable proof of Schiff's willingness to weaponize his position using secrecy and loyalty tests as tools in his political mission. But then came the detail that truly made jaws drop. The staffer testified that Schiff's obsession wasn't only about Trump. It all traced back to his own personal disappointment. Schiff had believed he would be named director of the CIA under Hillary Clinton. When Trump won, that dream collapsed. From that moment on, his actions seemed fueled not just by ideology, but by the sting of personal ambition slipping away. The claim that Schiff expected to become CIA director under a Clinton administration was the detail that electrified the story. According to the whistleblower, Schiff's fury over losing that chance was the spark that ignited everything that followed. The idea that he believed such a powerful role was within his grasp, only to see it vanish overnight, helped explain why his attacks on Trump were so relentless. Clips from his TV appearances only made this harder to deny. Week after week, Schiff went on shows like Chuck Todd's, declaring that collusion between Trump and Russia was in plain sight. But looking back, those words seemed less like a careful assessment of evidence and more like the anger of a man who believed his future had been stolen.
Well, it put an entire cloud over this entire country. And that's just not right, Maria. That's not the way it works. And thank goodness all of this is finally coming out. But imagine someone so desperate for power, so politically motivated that in this case he, or certainly a she, but in this case he, Adam Schiff, would actually twist and contort the truth and come up with lies and tell us he had evidence that we were going to be amazed by if he's finally allowed to bring it to light. Well, he didn't bring it to light because there was nothing.
And when critics asked if the evidence was in plain sight, why didn't he hand it over to investigators? There was no clear answer. This wasn't just an accusation whispered in private circles. The unclassified 302 report gave Congress proof, making it harder for Schiff to brush the story aside. His office did fire back, calling Kash Patel's claims false, unreliable, and the words of a disgruntled staffer. But the denial came across as defensive, almost panicked. Critics argued it sounded like projection, accusing others of the very tactics Schiff himself was being accused of. It was a dramatic twist. The man once trusted to guard the nation's intelligence now stood accused of twisting it to settle personal scores. And as the denials poured in, attention shifted to the damage his narrative had caused. Maria laid it out plainly. This wasn't just about Schiff. It was about what his claims did to the country. A sitting president spent years under a cloud of suspicion, forced to defend himself every time he stepped up to a microphone with the same line. "I did not collude." That constant defense drained political capital, scared away potential staff, and cast doubt on every decision coming out of the White House. The impact even stretched beyond America's borders. World leaders began to question whether Trump had cheated his way into power. The collusion story, born out of a Clinton campaign strategy and fueled by Schiff's relentless claims, spread uncertainty across the globe. It weakened America's standing and made allies hesitant. The idea that an election might have been rigged wasn't just political theater. It cast a shadow over the credibility of the entire system. And for ordinary Americans, it left scars of bitter division. Families, friends, even co-workers split into warring camps over whether Trump was guilty or innocent. Maria's words cut through the noise. A made-up story had ripped the country apart. Imagine the desperation it takes for one politician to cling to power so tightly that he would bend the truth, insist he had evidence he never showed, and drag an entire nation through years of chaos. Even after multiple investigations declared there was no collusion, Schiff refused to let go. He went back on television again and again, repeating the same line. Evidence of collusion is in plain sight, but the question remained. If that evidence was so obvious, why wasn't it handed to investigators? Why wasn't it presented in court, in hearings, or in any official report? The truth is, he never produced it. Instead, the narrative dragged on for years, shaping headlines and fueling partisan battles. While America faced real challenges, immigration, national security, looming budget fights, much of Washington's energy was wasted on a story that had already collapsed under scrutiny. By this point, people were exhausted. The word collusion had been repeated so often, it lost all meaning. Yet Schiff kept pushing it, as if repetition alone could make it true. Meanwhile, the rest of government moved on. Congress faced another shutdown deadline, but the Russia saga was still eating up time and attention. What was once framed as the scandal of the century had become a political weapon wielded by one man who refused to let it die. Soon, pressure began to build again. Representative Comer hinted that a fresh investigation could be on the horizon, raising a critical question. How could Schiff, once chairman of the House Intelligence Committee and now a senator, avoid accountability forever? For years, figures like John Ratcliffe and Devin Nunes had warned that the truth was being buried. Now, with access to the National Archives, emails and documents began to surface that appeared to back them up. The responsibility, they argued, now rested with Pam Bondi. It was her job to take this evidence forward and finally hold the key players accountable. And the names weren't small. Schiff, James Clapper, James Comey, even Christopher Wray were all tied into this tangled mess. Conservatives who had watched the drama unfold for nearly a decade demanded answers. They had been promised accountability for years, but nothing ever seemed to happen. If these powerful figures slipped away without consequences yet again, it would fuel even deeper anger. Behind the scenes, whispers grew louder about grand jury deliberations. Reports suggested the Department of Justice was taking the new evidence seriously. The stakes were high, not just for Schiff, but for the entire system of trust in Washington. After years of political theater, Americans wanted something simple: transparency and justice. And this time, the pressure to deliver was stronger than ever. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Also, drop your thoughts in the comments below, and we'll see you on the next one.